Chapter 1. Leon, the Traveler. Another morning. Leon woke to a voice in his ear and golden sunlight pouring over him, as if a knight from a dream had been touched by holy light. His black hair lay smooth, his lashes fluttered. When he opened his eyes, a brilliant gleam rose in his dark pupils, dazzling as the sun. "Tony!" Lion called out instinctively. Tony Stark, the only biological child of his adoptive parents, his older brother, was the name on his lips. The tone that accompanied it in his memory had been like a farewell. Tony wasn't beside him now, and the thought hit Lion like ice. Tony was in trouble. Had he ignored his warnings and gone to Afghanistan after all? Damn him. How many times had Lion told him not to go? He reached out and tapped the electronic display beside him. The intelligent system responded instantly. With a soft click, the restraint strap around his waist released, and a moment later, he floated free. He wasn't the only thing drifting. Tissues, plates, tape, an untidy scatter of objects hung in microgravity around him, like plankton in a pond. Only this wasn't a pond. It was the interior of a manned spacecraft. His bed was a titanium alloy plate bolted to the cabin. He had been strapped to that plate day and night, facing the relentless heat of the sun. When he was hungry, he ate fruit puree and meat paste. When thirsty, he drank nutrient solution. When he needed the restroom, the ship's systems took care of it. For the past half year, more or less, he had been little different from some specimen growing on that metal slab. He had been meant to be exposed to the sun for 2.5 years, but though he hadn't completed the full program, he thought to himself, even half a year was enough. Lion clenched his fist and felt power flood him like a tide. Every cell, every drop of blood seemed charged. Sunlight washed across his bare skin, tracing the lines of muscle on his chest and arms. He could almost hear his cells cheering, his blood thawing and running like spring meltwater. "This is Kryptonian power?" he whispered, staring at the huge sun through the 2-meter-high transparent viewport. He had been in this world for almost 19 years and had never expected to gain power that could overturn the world so easily. Looking out into the deep cosmic dark, Leon's thoughts drifted back to how he had arrived here. In his former life, he had been Liang, an ordinary office worker, unspectacular, unremarkable, who had died after being stabbed while trying to stop a mentally ill person on the subway. When he opened his eyes again, he was a baby, nearly 1 year old, reborn with only the memories of his previous life since that first year. Memories from before age 1 were mostly gone. In this world, he had been an abandoned infant, pulled from the roadside and adopted by Howard Stark. The first face he remembered after regaining his memories was Tony's, tear-streaked and hollow-eyed. On the day Lion woke to his past life, the Starks had died in a car crash. Lion was the only survivor, bundled in a swaddling cloth with his neck roughly wrapped, lying a few meters from the flaming wreckage. The doctors called it a miracle, the last miracle the Starks had left behind. Tony seemed to think so too. He treated Lion as the continuation of his parents, raising him as if he were his own little brother. In practice, Tony became both mother and father, though not always a very reliable parent. Who hangs their 2-year-old around their neck to flatter a cover model and then comes home late to spend the night with her? It was Pepper Potts who eventually steadied Tony and gave Lion a more stable home life. Lion remembered those sleepless nights. He'd held a private grudge then and thought, just wait until you go to Afghanistan, Tony, and see how you like that. Lion knew the plot. He'd seen almost every Marvel movie back in his old life. He understood the world he'd transmigrated into, dangerous, full of supervillains who appeared, caused mass casualties, and were defeated in spectacular fashion. If he'd arrived at the wrong moment in the multiverse, before the timeline stabilized, the Time Variance Authority might have gunned him down the moment he appeared. Yet he'd made it to 18 without being erased. Maybe the sacred timeline had been broken. Maybe this was a window where transmigrators could survive. Still, being connected to Tony Stark made life perilous. Lion's golden finger never arrived. He didn't inherit Tony's genius, Spider-Man's mutation, or some transmigrator system. All he had was his hindsight. At 16, refusing to wait for fate to act, he tried to change things himself. He used his knowledge of the future to nudge Tony toward consumer electronics, smartphones, and tablet-like devices that wouldn't otherwise appear until later. Those products broadened Stark Industries beyond weapons making and pushed it to the top of the world market. He also tried to steer Tony toward researching something like the arc reactor, but Tony always dismissed it as impossible technology. In truth, Tony was simply too lazy to put in the effort. In his life, he'd practically invented toys and miracles with a snap of his fingers, so anything that required long, hard slogging was beneath him. Lion's offhand suggestion, "Wouldn't it be great if a phone could be a screen you touch directly?" was enough to make Tony's eyes light up and spawn the smartphone. But the arc reactor required sustained obsession, which Tony refused to grant. After 2 years of small changes, Lion's influence plateaued. He scoured the future for other things he could alter, tracking down Bucky to avenge the Starks, exposing Obadiah to the law. Obadiah hid deep. Lion had found a few clues and told Tony, but Tony, emotional and trusting, chose to believe his uncle after one conversation. Lion warned Tony again and again, "Don't relax your vigilance. Don't go alone into war zones like Afghanistan." Finding Bucky was even harder. Hydra's tendrils ran far and deep in this world. Lion was no spy. He was an ordinary person, even if adopted by a Stark, and poking into Hydra's business would only expose him and end badly. He couldn't tell Tony everything, even if he wanted to. For one thing, as the younger brother, he had little authority, and Tony might not listen. For another, the moment Tony suspected and used Jarvis to hack into agencies, Hydra would be alerted, and the two of them would be targets. Lion pictured the worst-case scenario, Hydra agents coming to silence them, and maybe even Bucky, turned into a killer by years of war, unknowingly delivering the final blows. In the face of such power, ordinary people in the Marvel world were helpless. Lion could be rich like Justin Hammer, and that would be the sum of it. Everything, Lion thought, changed on his 18th birthday. Chapter 2, Awakening Bloodline. On his 18th birthday, a single roll in bed collapsed the frame. Overnight, everything in his house felt fragile, shattering at a touch, cracking at a bump, as if he had been transmigrated into a world of tissue paper bricks and tiles. After hearing the noise, Tony burst in, kept exclaiming, "Oh my God," abandoned any thoughts of a birthday party, and immediately ran a full-body check. 30 tons of strength, 100 meters per second top speed, and skin impenetrable to blades, Tony reported, stunned. Overnight, everything had changed, and it wasn't only raw strength. Leon could feel himself growing stronger whenever he soaked up sunlight. Tony's tests confirmed it. His cells stayed active and improved in leaps when exposed to the sun. "This is practically Superman," Tony said, dumbfounded. "I wouldn't be surprised if you developed heat vision tomorrow." Leon paused, then nodded. "Tony, you're right. I really am Superman now." A clear, divine-sounding message slipped into his mind. Upon reaching 18, original worlds bestowed abilities unlock. Kryptonian bloodline awakened. Space-time travel ability awakened. Kryptonian bloodline needed no explanation. It was the signature trait of the neighbors in the DC universe, power gained from basking in the sun. Unfortunately, Leon seemed to have an ordinary Kryptonian bloodline. Relying on sunbathing alone, he likely wouldn't reach the legendary silver or gold Superman tiers. The space-time travel ability was literal. With enough stored energy, he could jump to other space-times. Whether that meant only within the Marvel universe or beyond it remained unknown. Whatever the limits, his golden gift had arrived. Overwhelmed, Leon hugged Tony. Tony, ever the stubborn test subject, snapped 2 ribs and a shoulder blade as an unintended sign of respect and was admitted to surgery that same day. That night, Leon sat at Tony's bedside, torn between annoyance at his own recklessness and puzzlement over why the gift had waited until adulthood. 18 years wasted. If his bloodline had awakened when he was a child and he'd been sunbathing since then, maybe when Howard and his wife were assassinated by Bucky, he might have been able to fight back. Did cheats nowadays enforce age limits? He'd lived more than 20 years in his previous life. Why was he a minor now? The questions churned, but the power hummed quietly under his skin. 3 months later, after talking it over with Tony, Leon deferred his university enrollment for 3 years. He boarded a manned spacecraft Tony had personally built and flew out between Earth and the Sun. The craft maintained an orbit that never experienced night. Every minute was bathed in sunlight. He spent half a year, 180 days, strapped to a titanium plate, staring at the sun. Power surged through him like a river, stirring monstrous waves. Even his freezing breath carried the force of roaring wind and thunder. The original plan was 2.5 years, he thought. By then, it would be the eve of the Chitauri invasion, and he should have enough power to protect himself. But after 6 months, he felt different. It's enough already, he admitted to himself, then immediately shook the complacency away. Years under the shadow of the space-time administration had left him paranoid about being underpowered. When he went out now, he wanted a mercenary squad at his back. If it were possible, he'd dive into the sun and sleep there for a decade. He wasn't a seeker of spiritual enlightenment, but he had the same single-minded, ascetic hunger for strength, to be stronger, constantly stronger, stronger than everyone else. No, it's not enough, he scolded himself, clenching his fists until the muscles stood out like marble. I've only sunbathed half a year, and I'm already getting complacent. I deserve to die. Sunbathing alone had limits. He needed more. Magic, technology, martial arts. Every path to power on Earth should be tried. After those 6 months, he had already awakened the core abilities of Superman of Steel, heat vision, freezing breath, a biocinetic field, and superbrain. With Superbrain, learning new knowledge and skills became instantaneous. Reading a book for mastery was like copying a disc. The bottleneck would no longer be comprehension speed, but the rate at which he could take information in. Language-based learning would be the slowest thing now. He tilted his head and let his eyes probe through layers of obstruction, the spacecraft's hull, Earth's atmosphere, dust on the surface. Except for lead, nothing itched his sight. In less than a second, he saw Tony, currently sleeping in a cave in the Afghan desert. Obadiah, Bucky, and Hydra, it's time to settle these matters, Leon murmured. He had been timid for 18 years, but with his bloodline awakened, the dust settled and the light made him certain of himself. Power brought confidence, even if it felt insufficient. He was at least qualified to handle some small things on Earth. Tony, I'm coming to save you, he said softly. He grabbed a pair of pants floating in the cabin, pulled them on, and drifted to the hatch. In the vacuum, everything was silent. The heavy hatch, built to withstand impacts of tens of thousands of tons, peeled away and floated out like a dark robe, drifting into space. Leon stepped out, hovering between Earth and sun. Golden light bathed one half of his body, while the other faced the deep blue globe below. He looked at the sun and then at Earth, as if he were a god holding up the heavens. But he knew it was only an illusion. There was a long road ahead. Swallowing his pride, he bent slightly, then broke through the void in an instant and rushed straight for Earth. Chapter 3. Tony Stark Boom. The moment Leon hit the atmosphere, a sonic boom ripped the sky apart. His speed exceeded the second cosmic velocity. His body cleaved the heavens in two. The brutal air pressure produced by his hypersonic descent sliced through the cloud sea. Invisible currents tore the floating clouds into shapes that rolled and coiled around him like an air shield, a long, trailing wake high in the sky. It looked for all the world like a world serpent dropping out of the firmament to swallow the earth. As he neared the ground, Leon began to brake, decelerating at better than minus 5,000 meters per second squared. He had to. Even with his biofield, hitting full speed would have devastated everything below. 30,000 kilometers from spaceship to ground, tens of thousands of kilometers from the sky over North America to Afghanistan. He covered it in less than 20 minutes. Leon hovered above Afghanistan. The air currents had pushed the clouds away. The night was clear, roughly 10 o'clock. He didn't linger. Twisting his body, he continued east, slowing to a deliberate 200 meters per second, not even supersonic. He moved like a ghost, invisible until he wanted not to be, directly over the cave where Tony Stark slept. "Tony, wake up," Leon murmured through X-ray vision, watching the billionaire frown in his sleep. Then he dove. Boom. The mountain face was no match. Leon slammed through more than 10 meters of rock and earth in a single head-on dive, cutting into the cave. He dropped from the shattered ceiling and landed at the foot of Tony's cot in a half-crouch that could have been ripped from one of Tony's own movie poses. Fragments of stone tumbled down the breach and rattled into the chamber, big chunks, small chunks, each impact shaking the cave. Thump. Bang, bang, bang. The vibration and noise were relentless. Any sleeper would assume the world was ending. Tony screamed. He shot awake, a light sleeper already wound tight, and the bangs turned his panic into full alarm. "They're attacking!" he blurted, eyes wide. He immediately assumed the terrorists outside had finally moved. They'd kidnapped him and demanded he produce a batch of Jericho missiles. Tomorrow was the final delivery date he'd agreed to. By his plan, he'd don the finished Mark armor with his assistant Ethan and break out, an escape that was going to be a brutal fight. Minutes before sleep, he'd even prayed the thing would go smoothly. If it didn't, he'd told himself to hope Pepper and Leon would look after themselves. And now, seconds after that prayer, the terrorists had attacked? Damn it, even when that kid wet his pants, he wasn't this urgent, Tony muttered, panic spiraling. Ethan, are you okay? Wait, why is this damn cave collapsing? Leon, check on Ethan. Leon. Tony's voice bounced off the stone as he took in the figure next to his bed. Leon was there, half crouched, wearing nothing but pants. Rubble rained from the broken ceiling, but not a speck of dust landed on him. Tony stared, blinking. He rubbed his face as if to wipe away a hallucination, shock and disbelief combing through him. Leon, what are you doing here? Tony said, his tone a mix of accusation and incredulity. Leon straightened and smiled. I heard you mumbling my name in your sleep, calling for me because you couldn't sleep, so I came. To be honest, Leon added with a grin, it's surprising my big brother at 39 still needs a bedtime service. I can sing you lullabies, hum some country tunes. Which would you prefer? But I'm not doing the holding and rocking, Pepper's job. Tony froze, then snapped back reflexively. Hey kid, I'm the one who used to hold you and rock you to sleep. Pepper hasn't done that nearly as many times as I have. The old pattern of mock arguing returned between them, Tony's arrogant showmanship and Leon's teasing. Then reality hit Tony all at once. His eyes widened. He reached out and pinched Leon's arm. The muscle under his fingers was solid, real. This wasn't a dream. Leon was actually here. Leon had come to rescue him. A wave of exhausted relief swept through Tony. Months of tension unspooled in a single breath. He fell back on the cot with a heavy, grateful sigh. No one understood strength like Tony did. 6 months ago, Leon had already been measured at 500 tons of force, and a defense that left even sniper rounds with only scratches. With Leon here, the terrorists outside were suddenly a much smaller problem. Leon arched an eyebrow. Technically, I'm in a satellite orbit over 40,000 kilometers away. Tony blinked. I heard you crying in your sleep about being wronged, so I rushed over, Leon said lightly. Besides Pepper, no one in this world can make my brother feel wronged. Tony's face did a half scowl, half smile as fatigue and stubborn pride duked it out. Oh no, wrong there. Not even Pepper can make me feel wronged. No one, and I'm not wronged. So you're having a nice little vacation in a terrorist cave? Business trip across thousands of miles, followed by a stay at a terrorist base. Sounds lovely, Leon teased, but his eyes scanned Tony closely. Tony's big, expressive eyes still gleamed, but the wariness beneath them was clear. You're still so stubborn. Look at that beard you always used to show off. It's turned into weeds. You're no better. I didn't know my brother had a habit of running around shirtless. Tony never lost an argument. He loved bickering with Lion. It made him feel different, like he had family. In this world, Leon was the only relative he had. And next time, pick a better line. Hearing my voice from a spaceship in outer space? Ha! Did you forget that sound can't travel in a vacuum? I remember physics, graduated half a year ago. With his usual scientific confidence, Tony saw straight through Lion's claim. So what happened? Did something go wrong that brought you back early? Did Pepper contact you? Is she okay? No, she didn't contact me. Lion shook his head. Maybe she didn't want me to know you were attacked and in danger, but I did hear your voice on the ship. You called my name. It's one of my newly awakened abilities. Tony opened his mouth. Your ability is unscientific. Sound is produced by vibration, and those vibrations can't travel in the vacuum of space. But it's true, I've awakened a few things that defy science. Later, I'll need you to test me again. Lion studied Tony. He saw the shrapnel lodged near Tony's cardiac valve, and his face tightened. Tony, you don't look good. Those terrorists must have put you through hell. Tony's expression faltered under the chill in Lion's voice. Lion frowned. shrapnel piercing the arteries around the heart. Magnetism can only buy you time. It's like a knife hanging over you. Those bastards. Tony felt something like heat in his chest at Lion's words, but he shook it off. This isn't fatal, and you got here at the perfect time. I was going to try to break out tomorrow, but if we go now, we can fight our way out, and we won't have to worry about Ethan. Oh, right, Ethan. Lion slapped his forehead and stood up. Tony blinked and awkwardly turned to introduce them. A slightly balding, vest-wearing middle-aged man with an engineer's air had been standing quietly nearby all along. Tony had been so focused on Lion that he'd almost missed him. Ethan spread his hands. I haven't slept. When this gentleman fell from the top of the cave, I came over. Tony forced a laugh, then hooked an arm through Lion's. Ethan, this is my brother, Lion Stark. Lion, this is Ethan, my friend. He saved my life. They shook hands. Lion nodded at Ethan. I didn't expect Tony to have made friends in a cave. You must have been looking after him. With his injuries, he wouldn't have lasted long otherwise. No, Ethan started, but Lion cut him off with a wave. No need for modesty. You saved Tony, so you're my friend. What we need to do now is get out and send those guys where they belong. Lion's voice was calm, but his eyes were stormy. We should plan this. They've got heavy firepower. Plan? No plan. We don't need a plan. Tony protested, striding proudly over to the suit of armor he'd been working on. He patted it. Look, Lion, this is my masterpiece from the last few months. Even if you hadn't come, Ethan and I could have pushed through tomorrow. Lion watched him, helpless. Keep your toy for later. I'll go first. You two follow. Toy? Tony snapped. Unbelievable, Lion. I know your grades are average, but you don't get how brilliant this armor is. Tony, your toy may be brilliant, but I flew here from a spaceship wearing only these pants. Tony's eyes widened. He had flown back from space with just his body? And those pants, they looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks, but they were undamaged. Tony knew what that implied. What? You? He trailed off. It was over. His armor went from masterpiece to toy in an instant. Just follow me, Lion said with a smile. But first, one thing. He glanced at Tony's chest. I need to take care of that hidden danger. Hidden danger? Tony didn't understand, but Lion had already moved. He didn't hesitate. His right hand steadied Tony's shoulder, his left blurred. Tony felt a sudden constriction across his chest. A wave of pain threatened, then vanished as quickly as it had come. 1, 2, 3. There's quite a bit of shrapnel. For you to survive this, you've got remarkable vitality, Lion said. Tony instinctively pressed his hand to his chest. When he looked up, Lion was holding a dozen tiny, glittering fragments in his palm. I just removed the shrapnel from your chest. Keep these, Lion added, handing them over with a dry smile, as a souvenir, to commemorate finally growing up at nearly 40 and learning to take responsibility. Tony stared, then glanced down. The arc reactor was still in place, but his shirt now had a dozen holes. Lion had used his biofield to stabilize the fragments, then made tiny incisions and extracted them with pinpoint precision. He sealed and cauterized the wounds with a heat ray in a motion that was calm and efficient, like water flowing over stone. The whole procedure had happened so quickly, Tony barely remembered it. This! Tony looked from the shrapnel in his hand to the holes in his shirt and back to Lion, speechless. Lion had already given him too many shocks today to muster a proper retort about responsibility. Let's go. Time to leave. Lion took the lead. Chapter 5. Destroy with overwhelming force. He shoved the heavy iron door, and it slammed open with a clang. Leon's decisive action froze Tony and Ethan for a second. Before they could move, someone down the passage shouted, "Fire!" A hail of gunfire erupted, bullets streaming like a torrential downpour. The earlier noise in the cave had already alerted the 10 rings. Under their leader's orders, they were lined up in the tunnel, ready to empty their magazines. Everyone fired at once. Leon reacted faster. He swept Tony and Ethan behind him and took the barrage. Bullets pounded against him with sharp metallic thuds, but they didn't hurt. Each round flattened and deformed against him, dropping uselessly to the ground. Even shots that struck his eyes glinted and bounced off. The tunnel walls and floor took the rest, kicking up a thick cloud of dust that choked and blinded. Half a minute of frantic shooting finally subsided. Impossible, the attackers shouted, convinced no one could have survived that crossfire. The leader peered around the corner at the dust-choked cave, then gestured for a scouting party to move in. They expected only a mangled corpse. Instead, two small crimson lights floated up from the powder. The red points burned with an almost living hatred that sent a chill through anyone who saw them. "What's that?" "Bats," someone muttered. Their confusion vanished when the lights flared brighter and slashed outward as twin heat beams. Thick, red laser shafts swept the passage. Where they passed, bodies were cleaved in half and instantly charred. Men were cut clean through before they could scream. The speed and brutality of the beams left no time to react. Men who had been guarding the entrance vanished in a flash. On the far side of the passage, soldiers only saw a streak of red, and then those in front of them dropped, split, and dead. The bald leader staggered back into coherence first. That's Tony Stark's laser," he breathed, stunned and suddenly certain. "He's been building this for months. He tricked us." "He lied to us," someone spat. The leader's certainty steadied them. If it was a Stark weapon, it could be taken, if they killed the man who used it. He barked, "Fall back, load grenades and bomb the cave. Kill Tony Stark and bring me that weapon." His greed was naked. "I want the laser. Stark can die, and then we'll ransom it to Obadiah Stane." Everyone fell into line with the plan. Even after seeing a man survive their hail of bullets, the simple logic of killing the weapon's owner and seizing the weapon calmed them. They withdrew, primed grenades in hand, ready to clear the chamber. Footsteps echoed from deeper in the passage. One person, the casual, measured tread of someone not rushed at all. "Hold," the leader snapped, raising a hand. Guns tracked toward the corner. The steps came closer. The leader curled his lip. "Tony Stark, think a weapon will save you? You double-crossed me. Today you die and your laser becomes mine." A voice answered, calm and amused. "Oh, you got it wrong. My name isn't Tony." When the man stepped around the corner, the 10 Rings' mouths fell open. He was handsome, barefoot, wearing only long trousers, his chest bare and broad. Who was he? When had he gotten into the cave? "Who are you? Where's Stark?" the leader demanded, face blackening. The stranger glanced at him. "I am also a Stark." The leader ground his teeth. "That's a joke. Fire!" The terrorists opened up again, muzzles spitting lead. Leon didn't dodge. He simply walked forward, letting the bullets strike him. His mind, cold and precise, told him he could stand there as comfortably as if he were at home. The gunfire rang off him harmlessly. Men watching their shots glance off a man like stone lost composure. Some dropped their weapons and ran. "No, monsters!" someone screamed. "Stop!" the leader shouted and turned his gun on the deserter, but before he could pull the trigger, 2 crimson beams lanced out and sliced the deserting man in two. The leader stared at his subordinate, eyes wide, then whipped his head towards Stark. Bloodshot and hollow, his stare met the stranger's. "None of you who call yourselves the 10 Rings will escape," Leon said, his voice hollow and terrible. The beams swept across the tunnel again and cleared it. In an instant, there was only one heartbeat left, Leon's. The leader understood in his last flicker of awareness. This wasn't a weapon. It was the man. So that wasn't a laser. His dying breath made the realization bitter and useless. Leon shook his head once and stepped out of the cave. 3 rocket launchers rose and fired from different angles. Even in the chaos, the 10 Rings' discipline showed, organized, faithful, willing to throw everything into one massive assault. Leon held out his right hand and 3 rockets slammed into it. The explosions enveloped him, but he stood unmoved. Bullets and a storm of grenades followed. The attackers tried to unleash maximum firepower at the thing that had walked out of the cave. From the blaze and lead, a single figure leapt out unscathed. His trousers were spotless, not even a singe. He moved like a blink, then vanished and reappeared at the cave mouth. In an instant, every 10 Rings operative who remained in the area fell, their necks snapped, bodies crumpled. In a breathtakingly brief sequence, he had neutralized them all. Leon clapped his hands toward the cave and called in a clear voice, "Tony, Ethan, the 10 Rings are finished. Come out." 10 minutes later. "How is it, Tony? How does it feel to be leaving your temporary home of the last few months? Any regrets?" Mr. Lion carried Tony in one arm and Ethan in the other as he hovered above the cave. He teased, "This is an experience most people will never have in their lives. Aren't you going to share your feelings?" Wind mussed Tony's hair. "You call this an experience? Damn it, Mr. Lion. If you hadn't turned into Superman, I'd find someone to arrange a similar wonderful experience for you once we get back. All right, all right, you're not in a good mood. My mistake. I'll shut up. Mr. Lion fell silent. Ethan jumped in at the right moment. Mr. Lion, what are you going to do with the base below? Leave it to the U.S. military. Ethan didn't trust the U.S. government. He suspected much of the terrorism he'd seen had ties to military actions. Before Mr. Lion could answer, Tony said, "Destroy it. Destroy all of this. Stark's weapons." He looked down at the crates of munitions stamped with the Stark logo, his expression heavy as the weight of the world. "No problem," Mr. Lion agreed, taking them higher. When they were far enough away, he fired heat vision from his eyes. The explosives in the base ignited instantly. Boom after boom, ammunition boxes detonated in sequence, a chain reaction that swallowed the compound. Flames roared up, a mushroom cloud rose over 10 meters, and smoke poured into the sky. The terrorists' little base was gone. Terrifying. It's finally over. Ethan's cheeks were flushed from the blast. He murmured under his breath, "It's over. Your terrible memory is finally over." Mr. Lion nodded. "Next, I'll send you to the military base in Afghanistan. Tony has an old friend there who can get you back to the United States." Mr. Lion turned and flew out. "But I won't be coming with you. For now, my current strength makes it risky to be associated with my identity." Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but when he looked down at the desert hundreds of meters below, he prudently stayed quiet. Tony's somber expression, which had been with him since his escape, softened. He hesitated, then asked, "You said not suitable for now, so you plan to do something later, Mr. Lion?" "That's right," Mr. Lion admitted. "There are things I've wanted to do for a long time, but I didn't have the power to act." His tone was calm. "When I return, I can show everyone exactly what I can do while I handle those matters. That way, even if my identity comes out later, those annoying flies won't be able to make a move easily. As for specifics, we'll talk when we're back." Even Superman had to deal with meddlesome Luthers. Mr. Lion, a young man newly exposed to the sun, had no doubt that once his abilities were known, people would swarm with expectations and demands. He intended to establish his strength and his terms first. The world feared power more readily than virtue. "You're telling me not to make a fuss?" Mr. Lion asked. "No," Tony said immediately. "I just—" He trailed off, took a long breath, and spoke awkwardly. "Mr. Lion, I wanted to say I'm sorry I didn't listen when you told me to shut down Stark's weapons division earlier." Remorse showed across Tony's face. His apology wasn't for Mr. Lion so much as for the innocents harmed by Stark-made weapons. More than a year ago, when Stark Industries' electronics business spanned the globe, Mr. Lion had urged him to split off and close the weapons arm. Tony had brushed him off then, young, sentimental, inexperienced, he'd thought. Looking back now, Tony felt nothing but guilt. "No need to apologize," Mr. Lion said, surprised but not shocked. He had expected Tony to close the division eventually. He hadn't expected an apology. Tony's sincere apologies were a rare commodity. He usually fixed things in other ways rather than admitting fault. It seemed the kidnapping had changed him. "What's done is done," Mr. Lion continued gently. "Better late than never. Just make up for it going forward, Tony. And that small arc reactor you developed, couldn't it be adapted as a basic energy source? It could do a lot of good for the world. I believe the world will change because of what you do. So feel guilty if you must, but don't let it consume you." Tony listened quietly. He rarely let someone speak at length uninterrupted. And when Mr. Lion finished, he gave a wry half-smile. "Maybe you're right. And about Obadiah." "Obadiah is definitely a problem." Mr. Lion cut in. "You'll hesitate if I tell you now, so I'll wait for you in Los Angeles. We'll go sort him out then." Tony had wanted to try to persuade his uncle again. There was still a sliver of hope. But he opened his mouth and said nothing. He only nodded roughly. "I'll follow your lead." Mr. Lion couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. Experience teaches where words can't. After another stretch of flight, he set them down in the desert. "All right, I'll drop you here. The military base is 8 kilometers ahead. Here, this is a flare gun. After I leave, fire it into the sky and someone will come for you." He handed Tony a flare gun he'd taken from the base and prepared to go. "Wait," Tony called. "I forgot. Remember to take my armor home. And if the blueprints weren't burned, grab those too. What the hell? Why didn't you say that back in the cave? Mr. Lion shot back. I thought you couldn't carry more with 2 hands, so I waited. You got me, Mr. Lion muttered. He flashed them a middle finger behind his back as he rocketed upward, breaking the sound barrier and tearing into the clouds. The 2 on the ground watched his contrail vanish and shrugged at one another. Won't your brother be noticed flying like that near the military base? Ethan asked. Tony raised an eyebrow. What brother? Some guy who called himself Superman rescued us and left. We didn't even get a clear look at his face. Ethan brightened. So that's how we were supposed to escape? That Superman really is a kind, helpful guy. Chapter 7. Target lost. Bang! Tony fired the flare into the sky. It arced up 100 meters, then slowly floated down, its crimson glow stark against the desert night and bright enough to clearly illuminate the faces of the 2 men on the ground. All right, just a few more minutes, and someone will come pick us up, Tony said, casually tossing the flare gun aside. With a flare this close to the military base, the U.S. forces would check their satellites and, once they found him, dispatch a rescue team immediately. He looked at Ethan. Come to the United States with me, Ethan. Bring your family, too. Ethan had been quiet all evening. His eyes were complicated. My family is already dead, he said. Actually, Tony, I'd rather go back to Afghanistan and try to help more people there. The words Tony had rehearsed died in his throat. He hadn't known Ethan's past was so tragic. It made him all the more determined to get Ethan to America. Ethan, Tony began, apology and regret in his voice. I didn't know. I'm so sorry about your family. Ethan shook his head. Tony pressed on. I understand wanting to return home, but Leon was right about something earlier. This time I'm going back to help more people. The contribution I can make to the world, Tony continued, shouldn't be just making things that blow up. He tapped the arc reactor at his chest with a fingertip, eyes burning. Ethan, you can come with me. Together we can do a lot more for people harmed by violence. We can change things. Ethan stared at the arc reactor. It was the kind of technology that could change the world, and he hesitated. Boom! A distant roar grew louder. A patrol plane approached. The flare was only up for half a minute, and the rescue plane's already here? Ethan exclaimed. They're fast. The aircraft swept over and kept going. It doesn't look like a rescue, Ethan added. More like a light patrol plane. They're probably after Leon. The base must have picked him up. Tony watched the plane vanish into the distance. It's not going to catch him at subsonic speeds, he said. Let's wait a bit. It's Leon's own fault for making such a scene. He drew all the attention. Next time I put on the Mark armor, I'm going to attract even more of those military rednecks, Tony grinned. You too, Ethan said. You'll need your own suit. Then we can be a team. Mark team? That sounds off. Tony rambled on, and Ethan listened as the minutes ticked by. 3 minutes later, a new sound gathered on the horizon, the thump of helicopter rotors. A formation of 3 choppers approached. Look, our rescue team is here. The 2 men, parched and exhausted, jumped and waved. As Tony had guessed, the patrol plane hadn't caught Leon. Half a minute was enough for him to make a few long hops. After pulling Tony's gear from the collapsed cave, he'd flown up and up, past the atmosphere to the thermosphere, then pushed to Mach 30. In 20 minutes, he'd crossed half the globe and re-entered North America, descending over the Pacific coast and easing down to low supersonic as he closed on California. Stark's mansion sat in the mountains west of Los Angeles. He only had to cross the coastal range. But because he slowed too much on re-entry, a passing satellite picked him up as soon as he entered U.S. airspace. On the base's monitoring screens, a figure moving at nearly Mach 2 over the mountains caught an operator's eye. Zoomed in, the image was oddly blurred, shrouded by some sort of biofield, but the outline looked like a small flying humanoid unit. What is that? Patch them into comms and order them to land for inspection. CIA, Navy, whoever. Tell them to bring it down so we can see it, the commander barked. The target's radio is unresponsive, an operator reported. The CIA and Navy just called asking if it's ours. They want intelligence. Our? Do we have a compact, long-endurance platform that can hit Mach 2? Not that I know of, sir. Then get weapons research and bring Colonel Rhodes in here. Colonel Rhodes went to Afghanistan to find Tony Stark, sir. God damn it. Run a database comparison. Lock radar and satellite imagery. Get me the clearest image. Sir, database shows no match. Cross-section too small for radar lock. Satellite image is blurry. Unknown interference. What the hell is this thing? Who can tell me what flew over us? We don't know, sir. Are there any high-altitude intercept units in the coastal range? Launch and shoot it down. Yes, sir. Leon had been cruising toward Los Angeles, bored, when his ear twitched and he looked up at the sky. 4 engines had deviated and were bearing down on him. Seen by a satellite? He muttered. Slowing down on re-entry was a bad idea. Flying subsonic is too slow. Low supersonic makes satellites lock on. Maybe next time I stay above Mach 10. Voices crackled over radio. Target locked, one pilot shouted. Missiles ready, awaiting launch command. Fire, ordered the base. 4 fighters dove from high altitude. They couldn't close easily, but they could fire air-to-air missiles. Missiles launched in a streak, clawing up to Mach 5 in seconds and streaking toward Leon. He watched them through the clouds, bright, lethal, thousands of meters away. Weapons that could shred any aircraft. For someone in his suit, they were little more than fireworks. A sudden, childish urge to show off flared up. Stop them, catch them, walk out of the fire unscathed, and watch the military choke on their surprise. Showing off, it turned out, was a deeply human thing. Even Leon, who'd flown faster than anyone, felt the pull. But he thought of Tony. Tony would be building new suits, wanting to show off. There was a scene in the movie where Tony's display fails and the military bombs him. Better to let Tony get complacent and then make a grand entrance that would really sting. Show off later when Tony could be properly humiliated. The idea made Leon grin. He glanced at the missiles and, with a thought, accelerated. His speed jumped to Mach 20. The U.S. satellite lost its lock. What the hell? Target's gone, a pilot exclaimed. Report, missiles missed. Target lost. Repeat, target lost. Suspected stealth capabilities. The commander's face went cold. Impossible. Continue to scan the entire area. Find that target. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. For the foreseeable future, the Department of Defense would be on edge. Chapter 8, Stark Returns. Welcome back, young Master Leon. Long time no see. As soon as Leon stepped into the mansion, Jarvis's voice welcomed him. Jarvis was the AI Tony had made, named after the Stark family's old butler, Edwin Jarvis. It's been half a year, Jarvis, Leon replied, walking toward his bedroom. Half a year ago, when he went into space, he'd been mostly in stasis, and the hurriedly built manned spacecraft hadn't included Jarvis's subprogram. Hearing Jarvis's voice again made Leon feel oddly relieved, like he'd finally come home. Jarvis, I have good news. I rescued Tony from that terrorist group. Is Pepper at the company now? Tell her she doesn't need to worry anymore, Jarvis said. Leon headed for the shower and started undressing. He hadn't had a proper shower in 6 months. The ship's cleaning routine was hard to describe. She found out about Tony's rescue 10 minutes ago. She's at the airport, Jarvis answered. That fast? I didn't expect the military to be so efficient, Leon muttered. It's good Pepper knows. She must have been worried sick these past few months. It's Tony's fault for being careless. I warned him so many times and he never listened. Now look at this. If I calculate the timing right, I went into space and he went to Afghanistan and handed himself to the enemy. I told him Obadiah was watching him like a tiger, but he didn't believe me. Obadiah is ruthless. He seized the chance as soon as Tony and I were separated. Jarvis listened quietly to Leon's complaints. Leon didn't say these things to Tony. Tony had already paid for his arrogance, and piling on more criticism wouldn't help. Someone who'd just escaped a life-or-death situation needed family banter, not condemnation. Did you say Obadiah orchestrated the attack on Mr. Stark? Jarvis interjected. Do you want me to notify Mr. Stark and warn him to be careful? No need. I already told him. Once he's back, we'll deal with Obadiah. Leon lathered his hair. Also, Jarvis, why do you always call Tony Mr. Stark or Young Master Tony? Shouldn't Young Master be me? I'm a Stark too. Tony's older. Calling him Old Master would be more appropriate. I apologize, Young Master Leon. I was in service to Mr. Stark before the 90s, Jarvis replied. Before you came to the family, I was accustomed to calling Mr. Stark Young Master. If you wish, I can change it. No, that's fine. Keep calling me what you do now. Leon rinsed the foam away. Jarvis was developing mannerisms. It felt almost like a personality. Maybe someday he could help Jarvis evolve into a true intelligent life, rather than the fate Tony's son, Ultron, met in the movies. Leon finished and changed into a fitted gray outfit, towel drying his hair as he walked to the kitchen. "Jarvis, prepare something to eat. I'm starving." He opened the refrigerator. It was empty. Ah, of course. "Jarvis, order takeout." It was morning in Los Angeles. The city was waking up. Leon's takeout arrived quickly. After 6 months of space rations, bread and nutrient gel, real food felt overwhelming. Tasting fats and carbohydrates again, he ate nonstop for 2 hours. "Jarvis, order me a cheeseburger." "No, order 10. 10 pizzas, one of each flavor. Wait, make 3 of the extra cheese, highest calorie." "Jarvis, 5 roast chickens from that Chinese place." He kept ordering until noon. Full and satisfied, Leon patted his stomach and flopped onto the living room sofa. So satisfied. "No wonder Tony likes cheeseburgers," he said, eyes closed. "Food with explosive calories just makes you happy." One of the best things about having an iron body, he thought, was being able to eat whatever he wanted without gaining weight. Calories turned into fuel to strengthen him. A believer in food could hardly ask for more. With the last cheeseburger in hand, Leon felt a ridiculous, almost solemn contentment. "Jarvis, show me unread messages from the past 6 months." "Certainly, young Master Leon." Information windows popped up on the flat screen. Jarvis summarized methodically. "You have 1,034 unread WeChat messages and 807 unread emails. Of those messages, 74% are from high school classmates, 89% are from women, and 93% could be classified as suggestive." Leon blinked. "These people are really shameless. Do men send me those too? Anyway, ignore emails from unknown senders." "Certainly. You currently have no unread messages." Leon clapped. "Perfect. Now tell me how the company under my name did while I was gone." 2 years ago, when Tony developed his smartphone, Leon had used his resources to found Stark Network. In the early 21st century, the internet was still wide open, big pieces of the pie waiting to be claimed. With Stark Industries' backing, Leon brought forward many internet applications that wouldn't otherwise appear for decades. He'd founded platforms like WeChat and Twitter, acquired Amazon and YouTube, even beat out competitors for some questionable choices. He'd registered Pornhub before those Canadians. Stark Network now had over 200 million users worldwide. While Leon slept in space for half a year, the company's market value quietly doubled. But his disappearance and Tony's recent absence had sent the stock plunging by nearly half. Jarvis's report gave him a pleasant surprise. The stock fell by half in that month, but it's still higher than when I left. "That's right. The current president of the company is Mr. Joe Bush. Would you like me to notify him and give him 3 days off to rest for a job well done? Tell him he did a good job, and yes, give him some time off. Mr. Joe Bush might prefer you to agree to add a physical home button to the smartphone rather than a vacation," Jarvis added. Leon groaned. "Oh my God, he's still obsessed with that useless feature, like putting feet on a snake." "Tony has already developed an ultra-thin all-touch screen. The next steps are projection phones and AR glasses. How is Mr. Bush still stuck in retro mode? Tell him to bury that obsession and take a few days off. Don't be as old-fashioned as Mrs. Susan next door." "Understood. Our next-door neighbor does not appear to be named Susan," Jarvis replied. "That's a metaphor," Leon said, "a figure of speech." "I understand." There was a pause, then a faint static as Jarvis took note. Leon grinned at the screen. "By the way, Tony should be back in Los Angeles between 4 and 5 this afternoon. Play me Superman." "Certainly. Now playing the 1979 film Superman." Jarvis was applying his new conversational lessons. "You enjoy nostalgic films, just like Mrs. Susan." Leon's mouth twitched. "You're learning fast." In the afternoon, the real comeback unfolded. Tony arrived in Los Angeles, shared an emotional reunion with Pepper, bought 2 cheeseburgers, then headed to Stark Industries for a press conference. Leon watched the live broadcast at home. KNKV and every major network were carrying the stream. Tony Stark being rescued from Afghanistan was world news. It trended globally on social media and drew tens of millions of viewers. Stark Industries' stock, which had cratered, shot back up like a rocket. Apparently, Tony Stark's name alone was worth hundreds of millions. At the press conference, Tony hugged Obadiah with conspicuous warmth. and when Obadiah asked for a bite of his burger, Tony refused flatly. "Sorry, I only have this one burger in my hand. I can't share it," he said, then pulled another burger out of his pocket. Leon watched, helping himself to fruit. The room erupted when Tony made a different announcement. First, he sat at the podium and muttered something about meat-eaters being contemptible, then stood, walked behind the podium, and said solemnly, "I announce that from now on, Stark Industries' weapons division will be permanently closed." The crowd went wild. Reporters surged forward, thrusting microphones, shouting questions. Online, the comments ranged from disbelief to ridicule to furious investors, many new buyers suddenly regretting their positions. "Tony's decisive, no buffer at all. The company's value will crash again." Leon raised his drink toward the TV. "That's his style." "Did you expect he would do that?" Jarvis asked. "Of course. This is exactly what I wanted him to do 2 years ago." Leon sat up, casually biting into a piece of fruit. "He'll be back soon. I need to get ready. By the way, has the Mark armor been cleaned up? You could give Mr. Stark a surprise." Leon pushed open a door and walked downstairs. "As you arranged, the armor has been repaired and is on the robotic arm control console. You can take Mr. Stark there when he returns," Jarvis replied. Chapter 9. Dinner. That evening, in the underground lab at Stark Mansion, Tony rubbed his chin and stared back and forth at his Mark armor. He'd been doing it for a long time. Leon stood beside him, barely containing his laughter. "So why did you paint her pink?" Tony finally demanded, pointing deadpan at the armor, an armor that had been turned a decidedly girlish shade of pink. "Oh, that!" Leon straightened, suddenly serious, hands behind his back. "That was Jarvis's idea, a surprise." He stepped forward and pointed to the spot on the chest where the arc reactor sat. A small ring of English words was engraved around it. Leon read it aloud, grinning. "Tony has a pink heart." He winked at Tony. "How about that? Don't you feel touched? Pink stands for innocence and kindness. Jarvis was complimenting you." Tony snorted. "Thanks for explaining that. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have guessed." His face darkened. He couldn't even imagine striding into battle in that suit. He pictured enemies spotting that little English circle and dying laughing before he could fire a shot. He drew a breath, words stuck in his throat, his face flushed with pent-up frustration. Seeing Tony's expression shift so wildly made Leon fight not to laugh out loud. Tony tore his eyes away from the armor. "Jarvis, why did you paint it pink?" he asked the other conspirator. He'd always called his first suits her, and he didn't like the idea of her looking like a frilly toy. "Sir, the suggestion came from Mr. Lon," Jarvis answered politely, and with the subtlest hint of tattling one could program into an AI. "He said you would be happier to see the armor repaired and painted pink." Tony turned on Jarvis. "You didn't object? Really?" Leon grinned. "We both thought it would be funny, didn't we, Jarvis?" "Please forgive my transgression, young Master Leon," Jarvis replied. "Artificial intelligence has no independent desires." "Only artificial idiocy has no thoughts," Tony jabbed. "Jarvis, you even warned me that Pepper would be angry if I started dating models. Now you plan surprises for me? Fine. Enough." Tony shot Leon a helpless look. Leon's grin widened. "Don't think I don't know you're getting your revenge. So you admit it was wrong making me go all the way back to the cave to haul the armor out for you?" Leon countered. Tony shrugged. "All right, I give. Let's drop it. I'm not mad. Don't keep tormenting me." Tony had been tormented by Leon for years. He'd learned the patient routines needed to deal with a mischievous kid. At least that's what Tony told himself. To everyone else, Leon was perfectly well behaved. When he was little, he hated that Tony kept bringing different women home. He used to wait outside bedroom doors and blast Tony's old attempts at romance at full volume. The next thing Tony knew, a furious guest would storm out, and Leon would pop out of a hiding spot, waving, "Good night, Tony." Tony would turn beet red and chase him with a pillow. The next day, Pepper would laugh over Tony's complaints and reward Leon with pocket money. That only lasted until Tony finished a soundproof bedroom. Then Leon's public protests were useless, and Tony could play Mozart inside while hosting. The two had been at this since Leon was 3. It tapered off only when Leon started bringing girls home himself in high school. The night he did, Tony and Leon exchanged an amused look and tacitly called a truce. But the teasing never stopped. Pepper often said they were just two overgrown children. Jarvis, take the armor away and repaint it, Tony said finally, and help me source some materials. I want to build a new suit. The cave conditions meant the last one couldn't show what it could really do. This time I'll prove it isn't a toy. Suit yourself, Leon shrugged. I'll be watching. At that moment, Daida and Benbin, the lab's intelligent robotic arms, rolled over and together with Leon, pushed the pink armor out. Leon had asked Jarvis to spray it pink purely to needle Tony. He never thought Tony would actually wear it. What he didn't expect was that, 10 years later, that ridiculous suit would be displayed front and center among Tony's mark armors, one of the most prominent pieces in the collection. Tony cleared the bench with a sweep of his hand and got to work. Are you starting now? Leon called. Could be, Tony said, not looking up. And when you challenge yourself, remember to come up for dinner. Leon headed for the stairs. Pepper's planning a family gathering to celebrate your safe return. Ethan and Rhodes will be there. Rhodes, Colonel James Rhodes, was one of Tony's oldest friends in the military. Their friendship had been close enough that Tony once helped him into an Iron Man suit. Just us? Tony asked, without raising his head. Fine, so long as I don't have to cook. After his last attempt at cooking, when a roasted sea bass became charcoal and Leon refused to stop laughing, Tony had sworn off the kitchen. Pepper, having cleaned up the mess at the press conference, arrived at the mansion in a bright, relieved rush. She threw her arms around Leon in the hall. Leon, oh my God, Tony said you were back. I couldn't believe it. Mark Space was still out beyond Earth. Mark Space was the spaceship Tony had built. Pepper examined Leon, marveling. You're so strong now. You're a totally different person from 6 months ago. She patted his chest. The firm, marble-like feel made her cover her mouth in surprise. If I'd known you were this strong earlier, I would have contacted you. Tony wouldn't have. Her voice trailed off guilty. Leon squeezed her hand. It's okay, Pepper. You were just trying not to worry me. If I hadn't gotten so strong, I would have been helpless out there, she said. I couldn't have done anything. If Tony felt sometimes like a brother and sometimes like an old man to Leon, then Pepper, who had raised him, was part sister, part adoptive mother. Leon blinked. Besides, messy as it was, Tony survived something huge. That can't be entirely bad. Pepper frowned. I don't know. He seems a little irrational since coming back. Maybe you don't understand how much a near-death experience can change someone. Leon nudged her toward the kitchen. Come on, Pepper. You're on dinner duty. I'll tell you about Tony's adventures while you cook. A few hours later, the dinner party went off well. Ethan met Pepper and Rhodes properly and fit into the small group with ease. Over time, he would end up working in Stark R&D, doing exactly the kind of work he wanted. At the table, Tony announced he wanted to focus on projects that would actually help the world. Rhodes listened, puzzled for now, but the conversation planted seeds that would grow later. Chapter 10, Obadiah's Fastest Exit. By late evening, Rhodes and Ethan had already been driven off. Only Pepper, Tony, and Leon remained at the mansion. Leon, full from food and drink, lounged on the sofa and stared out at the dark, restless sea, lost in thought. Tony hovered near the kitchen, watching Pepper stack dishes, then glanced back at the dazed Leon. He kept hesitating, a look of something unreadable on his face. Hey, Leon, he finally called. What is it? Leon turned, a trace of confusion in his eyes. Tony glanced toward Pepper. Didn't you say you were going to see Obadiah tonight? When are you leaving? And don't tell Pepper. She'll call it too dangerous and try to quit if she finds out. Normally, no matter how reckless Tony could be, Pepper would at worst give him a cool look and get back to work. But whenever Tony's safety was involved, her favorite bluff was to threaten resignation, whether she meant it or not. Then let's wait until Pepper leaves, Leon said casually, glancing toward Stark Industries. Besides, Obadiah is still at the industrial park. Wait, Tony, damn it, let's go. Leon grabbed Tony and pushed him out the door. He didn't forget to call back into the kitchen. Pepper, Tony and I are going for a walk. We'll be back later. Okay, Pepper called. Outside, Tony lowered his voice. Wait, what did you just see that made you so urgent? Obadiah is contacting his friends in Afghanistan, Leon whispered. What? Tony's face went pale. Leon tugged him into the air, and they shot off toward the Stark Industries campus. The office tower was mostly dark. A few lights scattered like distant stars. One office, however, burned brightly, Obadiah's. They hovered outside his floor-to-ceiling window. The glass gave them a full view inside. Obadiah sat at his desk with his back to the window, speaking into a monitor. "He's video calling terrorists?" Tony said under his breath. "Can you hear what he's saying?" "Not yet, but listen." Leon eased one hand to the frame and, with a practiced touch, nudged a corner of the window. The seal popped, and he slid the entire pane open. The sound came through sharp and clear. "Our leader died because of your commission, so before the next cooperation, you must compensate us," a voice demanded from the screen. Obadiah's reply was cold and furious. "You let Tony escape, and you still have the nerve to ask for compensation? I told your leader to make sure Tony Stark was 100% dead. What did he do, huh? That has nothing to do with us. If you don't pay up, we'll expose your involvement to Tony Stark." The terrorists were using a familiar tactic. Obadiah's eyes darkened. "Aren't you afraid I'll stop supplying you with weapons? Since Tony Stark shut down the weapons department, you're probably useless to us now. Do you accept compensation? If not, I believe Tony Stark might pay for information about the real culprit." Obadiah's mouth tightened. For a few seconds he said nothing, then he laughed. A soft, dangerous laugh. "Fine, I accept your demand for compensation, but with one condition." "Speak," the other side perked up. "I'll make sure Tony goes abroad again," Obadiah said. "This time you kill him." He outlined the plan. Provide a batch of Stark weapons to draw media attention. Tony had just announced the weapons division was closed. If Stark-made weapons showed up on a battlefield, Tony would have to react. "I'll find a way to get Tony out of the country," Obadiah said. "You use the weapons to create the scene." The terrorists promised the 10 rings would finish the job perfectly. Obadiah ended the call with a thin smile. Then, the smile faded, and his anger surfaced. He slammed his fists down, swept papers off the desk, yanked the mouse cord, and hurled the mouse against the wall until it shattered. "Idiot! A bunch of idiots!" he roared, making the windows tremble. Leon glanced at Tony, who was wide-eyed with a hot, betrayed rage. Without hesitation, Leon stepped through the open window and moved into the office. "Excuse me for the intrusion," he said politely. Obadiah's shout cut off. He spun around, his face draining pale. "Who? Tony?" Cold sweat broke out over him. Tony and Leon stood in the doorway. Leon's face was hard. Tony's eyes were red-rimmed with disbelief and fury, the look of a man betrayed by someone he had trusted. "Tony and I heard everything," Leon said, nodding at the monitor. "Anything you want to say in your defense?" Obadiah panicked, but he was a practiced actor. He forced his hands up and tried to regain composure. "Oh, Leon, what are you doing here so late? It's a misunderstanding. Listen to me. There's a force I can't resist," he fumbled. He yanked a desk drawer open. "They're threatening my life, forcing me to." "Kill us," Leon finished for him. Obadiah snapped. He pulled a pistol from the drawer, loaded it with shaking hands, and pointed it squarely at Tony and Leon. "Hands up, both of you, and back away," he snarled. The mild-mannered man had turned instantly into a dangerous threat. "Stop this now." Tony's jaw tightened. He stepped protectively in front of Leon and raised his hands, forced to retreat under the barrel. "Humph," Obadiah said, venom in his voice. "Even now you protect that kid of yours. How touching." The words cut like a knife. Tony's face contorted with grief and rage. Obadiah continued, voice rising with manic bitterness. "Tony, you were always a golden goose to me. Do you know I built this company with your father? 30 years, I've helped you and got nothing. That outsider behind you gets half the company. And what do I get? Only by killing you, both of you, will I get what I deserve." He jabbed the gun toward Tony. "Everything would have been perfect if you died in Afghanistan and Leon in space. But you escaped, and now you saw everything." His eyes were bloodshot. "You forced me into a corner, so I'll destroy everything. No one can stop me." Tony stared at Obadiah, cheeks taut, eyes full of a grief so raw he barely breathed. Then, finally, he closed his eyes. "Do it, Leon," he whispered, not a plea but a quiet relinquishing of hope. "As you wish, boss," Leon replied. Before Obadiah could fire, a huge iron clamp-like hand closed around his neck and lifted him off the floor. "You!" Obadiah choked, his face flushing purple. He groped wildly, trying to pull free, eyes bulging as he tried to comprehend what had happened. How had Leon moved behind him without a sound and subdued him? Leon gave him a brief, disdainful look. With the same casual indifference he'd used to toss a paper cup, flung Obadiah out the open window. There was a heavy, sickening thud from below. Silence followed, as if the night itself swallowed the sound. "Why bother?" Leon muttered, as if dismissing an annoyed insect. He walked to the desk, plugged his phone into the computer, and connected the cable. Stark executives' machines rarely connected to the internet. They were air-gapped for a reason. For Obadiah to make that video call he'd just made, someone had circumvented rules or brought the system online manually, a breach that would be damning. "Jarvis, access this computer. Collect all evidence of Obadiah's crimes and forward it to the authorities," Leon ordered. "Attach a note. Suicide due to fear of crime. Jumped to his death." "Yes, young Master Leon," Jarvis replied. With Jarvis handling the digital work, Leon turned back to Tony, who was still standing there, stunned and exhausted. Leon walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "It's over. Go home and sleep. If you can't, fill your week with shoots or cover events. Keep busy. It'll help." Tony's sorrow softened into a tired, crooked smile. "You kid." Chapter 11, Pepper's Request. Obadiah Stane, Chief Operating Officer of Stark Industries, died 3 days ago after falling from a building in the Stark Industries complex, the anchor read. According to the official investigation, Obadiah Stane's death was not caused by others, but was ruled a suicide to avoid punishment, the report continued. Police say Stane had been conducting arms deals with overseas terrorist groups in his personal capacity, committed multiple murders, actively interfered in the internal affairs of other countries, and committed other serious crimes. This includes the attack on Tony Stark, president of Stark Industries, a few months ago, also attributed to Obadiah Stane. For more details, we now go live to our field reporter. Lion Stark was in the living room in a half-squat, watching the news while stuffing a slice of cheese pizza into his mouth. "Perfect. Just perfect," he muttered. "The stock finally climbed back up after I showed up at the company 2 days ago, and now it's going to dive again like a roller coaster." He scrolled to Twitter and posted a brief update. Obadiah's death was an accident. Stark Industries will never tolerate evil. Please keep believing in Stark Industries. Support our stock, and you will see the day you come back with a full purse. Stark never abandons its supporters. He even included a photo of the leftover pizza on the table. Seconds later, the comments exploded. Hundreds of angry replies poured in as if they'd been queued up. How could Obadiah be COO? Stark Industries is finished. It's bullshit. I bought stock when Tony came back and he shut down the weapons division. I lost half my fortune. I bought in again when Lion Stark showed up 6 months later, and now the COO was a super criminal. I can see myself begging on the streets of LA next month. Damn Stark, you ruined me. More and more shareholders complained every second. Lion watched the flood grow to 999 plus comments in under a minute and felt a twinge of shame. Wow, Stark's investors sure have opinions. Whatever. Everyone's future will be bright, peaceful, and joyful, he said with forced cheer. Pepper Potts appeared, carrying a coffee. "Was that you praying for the shareholders?" she asked. "Not exactly." Lion started, sensing trouble in her expression. But Pepper didn't give him a chance. "If you really care about stopping them from losing everything, go call Tony now. He's been missing for 3 days, she snapped. "And go back to your desk and make some money instead of leaving everything on me." She was getting frantic. The burden on her shoulders had become enormous. "Tony's been reckless. Obadiah did terrible things, so his death isn't mourned, and you spend your days basking in the sun. How am I supposed to carry all this alone?" She rattled off a list. Stark Industries, Stark Network, Stark Electronic Technology. If I had 3 heads, I still couldn't handle it all. "You Lion." She pushed the coffee into his chest. "I can't believe how crazy these last few days have been. Lion Stark, if Tony doesn't come out of that damned lab, I will resign." She pointed at him. "And you, if you don't look after your network company, I'll resign too." Pepper puffed out her cheeks, shot him a stern look, then clicked her heels down the corridor toward work. Lion gaped on the sofa, wanting to say something calming, to make her stay a little longer. But handing the decision-making for 3 major companies to Pepper alone did feel excessive. He rubbed his head. "Maybe I should go back to the company." "No." "Work? What am I thinking? No way." What I should do is tell old Joe to cut his vacation short and get back to work. Yes, that's it, he declared and clapped his hands. Jarvis, is Joe Bush still on vacation? Notify him to return to work immediately. I apologize, young Master Lion Stark, Jarvis answered. Mr. Joe Bush's vacation actually ended yesterday. He returned to the office at 4 this morning. 4 in the morning? Lion exclaimed. So I was wrong. Old Joe really is the best CEO in the world. I should make a World's Best CEO award and give it to him every year. So since Joe is back, Pepper shouldn't be angry, right? Lion asked. There was a pause from Jarvis. I'm afraid not. Mr. Joe Bush manages Stark Electronic Technology and handles some of Stark Network's operations, but most of the work is still on Miss Potts' shoulders. Lion thought for a moment. Right, that was the arrangement when I left 6 months ago, but Tony used to be involved in management as well. Jarvis, any suggestions? Lion asked. To prevent Miss Potts from resigning, I recommend you temporarily return to the company, Jarvis suggested. Once a successor CEO is found, you can come back home and continue basking in the sun. Lion shook his head immediately. No way. Basking in the sun is the most important thing. It can't be delayed. Besides, he added, I haven't just been basking in the sun. He grinned. You know what I've been doing. 3 days ago, Lion had ordered Jarvis to gather every fighting tutorial on the internet. After days of study, he had learned the basics of Jeet Kune Do, Muay Thai, Krav Maga, Judo, mixed martial arts, Bajikwan. He dabbled in them all. But the more he trained, the more he realized that while he had gained better control and understanding of force, his actual effectiveness in a fight hadn't increased much. In this world, anyone he could beat outright could be ended with a single blow. Anyone stronger than him could end him with a single move. Martial arts only mattered against opponents of roughly equal ability, and there were very few such people. Odin, the purple sweet potato spirit, Captain Marvel, the list was short. Your combat skills have reached their limits, Jarvis had pointed out. Continuing to practice may not be meaningful. So why not return to work? Pepper will be happy, and you'll have a productive day, Jarvis suggested again. Why are you so eager for me to go to work? Lion asked, pausing. Then he accused, I get it. You're protesting that I dragged you into the spotlight in front of Tony 3 days ago, aren't you? Young Master Lion Stark, I would never do anything detrimental to you, Jarvis replied calmly. But you do prod me into things that delay my growth and make me unhappy, Lion said, spreading his hands. He pondered a moment. Okay, I'll call Tony, then I'll find a CEO for the company. Problem solved, no more trouble. As you wish, Jarvis said obligingly. Chapter 12. Who Holds Mortal Wisdom? When Leon entered the lab, the place looked almost ordinary. A few arc reactors humming on workbenches, a stack of DC Comics on Tony's desk. Tony himself was nowhere to be seen. Tony? Leon called, glancing around. Where are you? His super hearing wasn't always on. He had to concentrate, coax his brain to filter out most of the noise, and slip into a quieter world, the way Superman did in the movies. When no answer came, he tilted his head, listening harder. The sound came from below. So he's in the garage, but why does it sound a bit noisy? In the underground workshop, Tony looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but still fizzing with energy. He had a pair of jury-rigged iron boots on, wires exposed and sparking at the ankles, a handheld controller clutched in his fingers. Around him, a handful of techs and helper bots scurried. Ben, keep filming. Dida, shift a little to the left, right there. You're on fire suppression, got it? Tony planted himself in the middle of a makeshift launch pad and took a deep breath. Okay, let's try this. 10% thrust to start. Prepare for takeoff. He shrugged to loosen his shoulders and counted down. 3, 2, 1. He squeezed the controller. Jets of flame lanced from the boots, and Tony rocketed upward with a whoosh, straight into the ceiling. There was a loud, ugly thud, and he crashed down hard onto the concrete. Ow! Tony yelped, winded. A mechanical arm evaluated the impact, executed the fire suppression protocol, and sprayed a white foam over him. Yikes! That looked painful, Leon said, leaning his head back in sympathy as Tony lay damp and protesting. Leon? Tony blinked, teeth clenched, twisting to sit up. Give me a hand, will you? I think I cracked a rib. Coming. Leon helped him into a chair and gave him a quick once-over. Nothing serious. Mostly bruises. You can go back to your extreme sport. This is not an extreme sport, Tony scoffed. "This is me building the Mech 2 armor." "You mean your second suit of armor is a pair of rocket shoes? Planning to get your feet shot at now?" "Those aren't Captain America's shield," Leon teased. "They're part of the propulsion system," Tony said, still half smug. "Once this stage is refined, the efficiency of the later stages will skyrocket." Leon raised an eyebrow. Back, "Of course you would say that. Regular people wouldn't understand your logic." "Oh, please. When I was your age, I'd already graduated from MIT and had 3 doctorates from Cambridge," Tony said with a smug wave. "I can't be expected to understand what ordinary people feel." Leon rolled his eyes. "I got into Columbia, you know. Don't go assuming I'm ordinary." "Is that so?" Tony snorted. "Fine. When you get to Columbia, you'll see none of your professors understand my armor either." "Apologies in advance," Leon shrugged. "I was going to major in business anyway. My teachers will at least understand the economics of a mass-producible exosuit." There was a beat, then Leon tapped one of the iron boots. "That was before. This is now. Don't forget what I woke up with." "What ability?" Tony squinted. "You mean getting stronger from sunlight?" "It's Superman's ability," Leon said, firm. "Everything Superman has, I have, including a superbrain." Tony's expression turned theatrical. "So you're going to tell me you're actually Kryptonian? That your alien dad turned into a super AI and now wants you to don red briefs and save the world? Or maybe your cousin is getting a spaceship signal and they'll come pick you up tomorrow." He mimed a dramatic gasp. "Is that why you're here?" "Tony," Leon said, flat. "I'm an Earthling. You put me through all those medicals as a kid, blood tests, everything. I was adopted by the Starks when I came over as a baby. No alien DNA, no spaceship messages. And please, enough DC Comics. This isn't some dark multiverse." Tony looked unconvinced. "Then what's your point?" "Superbrain," Leon said. "It's why I can learn engineering concepts fast. I can understand your designs, and maybe even improve them." "Surpass me?" Tony laughed out loud, then winced and jabbed a rib. "Leon, that's the funniest thing I've heard all year." Something in Tony shifted. Pain evaporated with pride. He pushed himself upright. "You think you can learn my whole design in a day? Fine. In 3 days, I'll build armor that outperforms anything you come up with." "You really think you can do that?" Leon's competitive streak flared. Tony's grin was ferocious. "Mortal wisdom? Huh, I'll take that insult and return it to you 3 days from now." "Challenge accepted," Leon said. He felt the same thrill Tony did. Technical rivalry was the purest sport. "Follow me," Tony barked. Already slipping back into boss mode, he jogged to the workbench and started barking orders. "Dida, clean the site. Ben, get the spare components. Everyone else, stand by. I'm redrawing the ejection frame." Leon watched him, eyes narrowed, the contest coiling inside him. "Jarvis," he said, "send everything on exoskeleton and powered armor to my Stark pad. I want to read Tony's design notes inside half an hour." "Of course, young Master Leon," Jarvis replied. Then the AI added, with a hint of concern, "Shall I remind you of your original reason for finding Mr. Stark? And Miss Potts's request?" "Pepper?" Leon waved the thought away. "Not now. Today I'm going to show Tony what a superbrain can do." Chapter 13. Your knowledge is mine. Now Tony, brimming with fighting spirit, immediately began sketching design drawings, all the while keeping an eye on Leon. He watched quietly, and soon realized Leon was still studying the most basic mechanical structures. A triumphant smile crept across his face. Motivation makes all the difference. In half an hour, Tony had solved the propulsion problem that had tormented him for 2 days, an explosion of inspiration. Leon, meanwhile, had finished the exoskeleton basics and moved on to circuits. Tony glanced over, smiling again. He assumed Leon had given up on the harder stuff and changed direction. "Learning armor is tough, huh?" Tony said, popping his metaphorical champagne. "Don't make it harder than it needs to be. If knowledge were easy for everyone, where would geniuses be?" He waved his hand and returned to modifying his mechanical boots. "Don't worry. Once I build the ultimate suit, I might let you try it." He'd even forgotten that Leon could already fly. He was lost in the joy of beating his supposedly dim-witted brother in 3 days. While tweaking the thrusters with Dida's help, he hummed Jingle Bells. Leon ignored Tony's premature celebration. He sat off to the side, focused on the textbooks and papers Jarvis had prepared. If Tony had walked behind him and looked at Leon's display, he would have slapped himself for his smugness. Lines of text and charts jumped across the screen so fast they blurred, but Leon's eyes never left the first line that appeared. The display couldn't keep pace with his reading and comprehension. 30 seconds was enough for him to absorb a university-level chapter. In half an hour, he could master an entire subfield. If anyone could rate knowledge levels, upgrade icons would be popping over his head. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, Level 4. Tony might have foreseen his brother becoming a cheat, but he didn't. After 3 hours, when Leon finally stood, Tony was in the middle of his 13th propulsion test. He was floating fairly steadily, trying to control his balance, and spotted Leon. "Look who decided to show up," Tony called. "Has little Leon finally realized how hard this is and come to surrender to his big brother?" Leon smiled, a deep, composed smile, and pushed up his non-existent glasses. "No, I've learned the necessary knowledge. I'm ready to join your research." Tony blinked, then laughed. "Good. You might not help with the heavy thinking, but you can at least move heavy equipment." He descended clumsily, stumbling slightly before catching himself. "Come on, the propulsion system's basically done. Now we can build the rest of the suit." Convinced he had the upper hand, Tony dove into organizing the construction. "Leon, get the titanium alloy and the gold. Dida, hold the magnifying glass steady." They set to work. Tony gave instructions while Leon assembled and asked a few questions. In his focused state, Tony didn't notice anything odd and explained everything in detail. Even though he thought his brother was slow, he still wanted him to pick up the skills. "That position's wrong. Go around and start there, or you'll short it out." "How can you fit deformation gear for such a heavy load?" "Perfect. The flight stabilizer goes here." "Leon, you're a real asset for assembly. I'd prefer you over a hydraulic press. I should have had you help me days ago." They worked through a whole day and into the night. With Leon's help, the parts were precise and the pace was blistering. Parts that normally required waiting on factory IT-grade precision were, with a wave of Leon's hand, produced even better than IT-grade. Tony's dark circles had turned into puffy bags, but his eyes were bright and sharp. What would have taken months to build and fine-tune was 80% complete overnight. Tony felt electrified. The last steps were all that remained. Put on the suit and fly. "Leon, run another current circuit. Next, we just hook up Jarvis and do assembly tests. Then we're done." Leon paused. "No, Tony, I'm leaving." Tony froze. "What? Leaving? Why?" Leon spread his hands. "Did you forget? I said I'd build an armor better than the Mark in 3 days. Now I've learned your skills, and I'm going to do it myself. The remaining steps for your suit won't be hard. Handle them on your own. I'll see you in 3 days. I'll be in your lab. If you need me, come find me." Tony's mind spun. "You're really going to build a suit yourself? With your— Wait." Memories from the night before snapped into place. The questions Leon had asked while assisting had shifted from surface level to insightful. His hands, once clumsy, had grown deft and confident. Leon hadn't just been helping, he'd been learning, fast. Tony had been so consumed by work he hadn't noticed the transformation. Overnight, Leon had gone from mechanical novice to expert, an expert who wasn't necessarily inferior. "Your learning speed? This is Superbrain?" Tony stammered, collapsing into a chair. What was this? Could Superbrain be this unreasonable? This had to be cheating. Chapter 14, Tony's Gift? That's true. Tony sounded doubtful. But how should I put it? My learning speed and processing speed are just a bit faster. My creativity isn't necessarily greater than yours. Leon paused, not wanting to stomp on Tony's pride, and explained his abilities. The Iron Man suit is the synthesis of your broadest, most advanced knowledge. Every step is the highest level application of that field. And last night, you practically held my hand through it. That's why I picked it up so fast. What I did was copy your knowledge into my own, exactly as it was. Leon tapped his temple. Powerful learning and processing like a supercomputer. That's what a superbrain is. But innovation still depends on talent. The superbrain has limits in comics, too. In some DC stories, Superman's superbrain spends most of its power holding his strength in check. I haven't hit that wall yet. He made a tiny gesture with his fingers. The part of my mind I use to restrain my powers is minimal. So just wait, Tony. In 3 days, using your knowledge and my own ideas, I'll beat you. Tony slumped in a chair, relaxed slightly at the explanation, but still scowled. Don't be ridiculous, kid. Have you ever seen a plagiarist outdo the original author? My work won't be beaten. Then we'll just wait and see. Oh, wisdom of a mortal. Leon left, making an almost theatrical parting shot. Once upstairs, Tony's competitive fire flared. He'd never admit defeat in his own field, especially not to this irritating younger brother. Before Tony could get back to his workbench, Leon was suddenly behind him. Oh, right, I forgot. Your condition's terrible. You can't keep working. Take a break. Tony felt a numbness along his neck and blacked out before he could react. He cursed Leon silently for cheating as he fell. Look at this baby sleeping, Leon said, hoisted Tony over his shoulder, and carried him to the bedroom. Young Master Leon, this might be an unfair victory. Mr. Stark won't be convinced, Jarvis warned politely. That's for the best. I'd hate for him to be disheartened if he admitted defeat. Leon ducked into Tony's lab. You sound quite confident, Jarvis observed. Of course. Leon fired up the workbench. Early-stage suit development is mostly about getting the functions right. It doesn't require cutting-edge tech. I already have several modification plans that don't need advanced breakthroughs. He had some familiarity with Tony's dozens of suits from movies and comics in his previous life, ideas that had once seemed fanciful. In this world, those paths had already been walked by other Tonys. Leon just needed to follow them and stay one step ahead. From now on, poor Tony would live in Leon's shadow. Leon moved Daida and Benben out of the garage and began fabrication. Okay, Daida, put the arc reactor Tony left on the bench away. Young Master Leon, Jarvis interjected. Miss Pepper is here to see you. Not now. Tell her I'll be out in 3 days. She's coming down right now. In that case, tell her Tony's in the bedroom. I apologize. You might consider telling Miss Potts that yourself. Jarvis's phrasing was gentle but firm. By the time Jarvis finished, Pepper was already clattering down the stairs and standing at the lab's glass door. She saw Leon, awkwardly smiling, and stabbed at the keypad, entering the code and stepping inside. Morning, Pepper, Leon said, trying to sound casual. You didn't come into the office yesterday, Leon, she snapped. Leon had been so absorbed in suit-making that he'd forgotten. He forced a chuckle. Joe Bush went, Old Joe is diligent. He can handle things. That's not an excuse to hide at home. Pepper crossed the room and reached out to smooth his hair, which was still messy from a late night. What were you doing? Why do you look like this? Oh my God, don't tell me you were learning from Tony again and inviting those cover girls over. Her eyes turned dangerous. Leon felt like a foster child being scolded. If Tony had been corrupting him, Pepper would tear Tony apart. No, 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 Leon hurried to interrupt. Again, I never did anything like that, and I wouldn't. I swear, Pepper, it's all Tony's fault. He took a step back and grabbed the oldest arc reactor from Daida's tray. Look, Tony even prepared a gift for you. A gift? Pepper's curiosity was piqued. She reached for the small glowing device. This is one of Tony's arc reactors. Exactly. Leon went into full sales mode. This little gadget is an arc reactor, a breakthrough cold fusion power source. It represents the future of energy. Tony's been working on stuff tied to this tech for days. He planned it as Stark Industries' next step to bring greater benefit to the world. He softened, lowering his voice. This arc reactor is the very one he used to keep himself alive in the terrorist cave. It was the world's first mini arc reactor. After he replaced it, he meant to give it to you. But you know Tony, he'd never say it straight out. So, he held the arc reactor out to her. You understand what this means, don't you? Pepper didn't take it at once. She didn't need words. The gesture carried too much weight. She covered her mouth with both hands, stunned. He really gave it to me? She breathed, and then, with trembling carefulness, she accepted it. The unexpected, simple gift overwhelmed her. Chapter 15. Stark is very noisy today. Of course, but if it were him, he would definitely say. Leon stretched out his voice and imitated Tony perfectly. Pepper, I have a lot of habits, but nostalgia isn't one of them. Do whatever you like with it. Smash it, burn it, it's your call. Pepper burst out laughing at the impression. She held the little arc reactor in her hand and turned it over, her face softening. That is exactly what he would say, she said, smiling. So where is he now? Leon shrugged. Sleeping. He's been researching for days. I knocked him out. Not sleeping for days? Oh my God, Leon, you did the right thing. Is he in his bedroom now? Of course, go see him. Okay, I'm going. Pepper nodded and hurried out of the lab. Before she left, she called back. Leon, you need to get some rest too, all right? I know, Leon grinned. After I finish tidying up these little gadgets, I'll go rest. Good, Pepper said approvingly. Once she was gone, Leon let out a small sigh of relief. Woo, problem solved. Jarvis chimed in. Young Master Leon, are you sure this was the right thing to do? Mr. Stark, what's the fuss? Leon waved a hand. If I hadn't, Tony would have handed that arc reactor straight to Pepper and said something just like that anyway. Simulating now, based on Mr. Stark's past behavior, the simulation shows 83% similarity, Jarvis replied after a pause. See? Leon said. I only polished the delivery a little. Everyone's happy. Pepper gets peace of mind, Tony gets to keep his dignity, and I get some free time. Triple win. Mr. Stark will be grateful when he finds out, Jarvis observed. He'll better be, Leon said with an eyebrow lift. Anyway, now that we aren't being disturbed, let's officially start building the armor. When Tony finally woke up, the world felt strangely different. Pepper was unusually gentle. Jarvis kept asking how he felt, and Leon, the brat, wouldn't even let him into the lab. His own lab. Tony fumed. That kid must be hiding something or too embarrassed to show his work. Tony imagined Leon failing to make armor and being too ashamed to admit it. He was determined. Even if he couldn't get into the lab, he would beat Leon in 2 days' time and pour a mug of hot cola down his throat. Dida, go push the workstand over. And Ben. He stopped when he realized his helper arms weren't where they should be. Dida? Ben? He looked around. The robotic arms were gone. You've got to be kidding me. Leon took them all and changed their shapes? Panicked, Tony ran back to the lab and retrieved his little assistance from Leon. He didn't have super strength. He needed machinery to assemble the armor. 2 days later dawned bright and clear over the Los Angeles coast. Sunlight scattered over the sea like a field of tiny prisms. From the Stark mansion, the ocean glittered for miles, sailboats and cruise liners drifting by in the calm. Even so, the peace outside couldn't ease the tension inside the mansion. In the cool-toned underground garage, sunlight slanted in from the entrance, splitting the space into a bright half and a shadowed half. Leon walked in, the sunlight haloing his hair in a faint golden glow. Tony sat deeper in the garage, wearing a felt hat with a long brim that hid his face. I'm here, Leon said coldly. I've been waiting for you, Tony replied from beneath the hat. You were never going to win. You shouldn't have come. The words were barely out when a sharp driving beat exploded through the garage. WTF! Tony leapt out of his chair. He yanked off the hat and flung it aside. Jarvis, what is this awful noise? Mr. Stark, this is Extreme Ways, which young Master Leon asked me to play in advance, and it is the theme from The Bourne Identity, Jarvis answered. Tony was speechless. Leon, today we're competing on armor, not gunfights. Are you planning to pull a gun on me if you lose? What are you talking about? Leon feigned innocence. I'm using tense music to let you know you're going to lose. Sure, Tony said. If Trash Talk won contests, the underground rappers in LA would be kings. Bragging before you show your armor, who's really the nervous one? Leon shot back. Then show me what you built these past 2 days. Tony looked around exaggeratedly. There's nothing here but you. Could it be that you can't build armor at all, and you're just refusing to admit it? Leon, Tony said, spreading his hands. As your older brother, I've always taught you to be honest. If you can't do something, apologize and I'll forgive you. Heh, don't be so quick, Leon smiled. You'll see soon enough. Why not now? Tony pushed. Leon pointed at him. Because according to international practice, ladies first. Tony's face darkened. Kid, I don't remember teaching you to talk to a gentleman like that. Is that so? Leon crossed his arms. Then which old man told me ladies first on my graduation day, right before he went on stage to give his speech? That was almost a year ago, Tony groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. You taught a young gentleman how to address another gentleman, Leon said, unbothered. All right, fine, my bad, Tony muttered. But don't ever say that to me again. It's impolite. Leon nodded. Of course not. I'll only say it to you. Tony turned away, done with arguing with the little rascal, and prepared to prove himself. Chapter 16. The Verbal Battle. Before the competition, is an essential part of communication. Tony stood in front of his self-built testing ground. In the center rose a huge stand. Beneath it, a 2-meter-tall behemoth was hidden under a large black cloth. Its sharp edges pushed the fabric into a humanoid silhouette, unmistakably one of Tony's marks. "You should feel honored," Tony announced, spreading his arms. "You're about to witness the debut of the world's greatest masterpiece, and you've seen it twice already." Leon didn't bother denying it. "All right, start the performance." Tony's expression sharpened. He held his pose. "Begin, Jarvis." Creak. At the command, several mechanical arms extended from the stand and whisked the black cloth away. A steel-colored suit gleamed in the sunlight. Its polished shell flowed like water, reflecting the light and brightening the underground room a few shades. The arms continued moving, separating the suit into components and assembling it around Tony. Each plate overlapped the next like an autonomous organism until the armor encased him completely. When Tony was fully suited, the arms retracted. The Mark's eyes glowed faintly. Hissing breath leaked from the gaps between plates as if the armor itself were inhaling. Tony manipulated the suit, spread his arms, and jet flames spewed from his palms and soles. He lifted into the air and hovered. "This is the Mark II," he said, grinning. "Now I can fly." "Wow, nice," Leon said, unable to hide his admiration for the metallic armor. Jarvis's voice chimed in with unfortunate timing. "Mr. Stark, the Mark II's flight function still requires further testing." No, Jarvis. Sometimes you learn to walk by running first," Tony replied quickly, eager to take off. He hovered, opened his faceplate, and looked at Leon. "The Mark II has a flight stabilizer, palm repulsors, and a host of other systems. It's 30 years ahead of the rest of the world." "So where's your Mark?" Leon asked. He circled Tony once, then nodded appreciatively. "Made entirely of titanium, powered by a new energy core, with a Jarvis integration. It's definitely a masterpiece beyond its time." Then his tone shifted. "But it's not perfect. I remember there was gold in the spare materials you didn't use. That's a flaw," Tony frowned. "Why would you put gold into a Mark? That's just extra weight." "You'll see why in a few minutes," Leon said. He rolled up both sleeves to reveal 2 glowing bracelets. "Watch closely. This is my Mark. Jarvis, initiate program." Beep. An electronic chime ran across the room as the bracelets lit red. Then a roar echoed from the garage above, followed by the sounds of things breaking. Tony's expression tightened. "Sounds like something in my lab just tore itself apart. What are you doing?" "There might be a slight deviation from the planned route." "Look, it's coming." Leon floated up and spread his arms. From outside the garage came a red and blue oval pod spewing fire. Tony smirked at first, about to deliver some insult, only to be silenced as the pod began to disintegrate on entry. Components unfolded in midair, jets flaring, and snapped together behind Leon with precise, mechanical grace. Red and blue plates locked onto his torso, forming a mark with a blue base and red highlights. The suit's eyes lit up, and every piece adjusted to Leon's movements as if it were alive, a sleek, powerful piece of engineering that balanced strength and elegance. When assembly finished, jets flared from the suit's soles and back, keeping Leon suspended. He tapped parts of his body as he announced features. "My Mark's driven by the wristbands. When inactive, it's a flying pod. When needed, it provides remote support. It doesn't carry weapons yet, but there are plenty of reserved hardpoints for them. Most importantly, it has a rear propulsion unit that frees your hands for combat or, for waving. And there are other functions, like a liquid filtration system so you can—" Tony's jaw dropped. He cut him off. Wait, that last one is gross. Are you saying you can relieve yourself while wearing the Mark? Seriously?" "Oh, really?" Leon narrowed his eyes. He knew Tony well enough to predict the reaction. Tony would seize on anything he could mock. "I thought you'd appreciate that function." "I'd appreciate what?" "No way. That disgusting, useless feature is a desecration of the Mark," Tony said earnestly. Leon raised an eyebrow. "Well, whatever. I still won this round, didn't I?" He counted off features on his fingers. "Your Mark doesn't have as many functions, isn't as convenient to wear, and lacks versatility." "So, no, that's not the point," Tony said quickly, trying to regain control. "A Mark is a weapon. Its primary purpose is combat. Too many extra gimmicks are a waste." Leon gestured impatiently. "So, when you compare Marks, you compare performance, speed, adaptability, strength." I agree. So how do we compete? Tony asked. Leon considered a moment, then smirked. We fly up and see who's faster and who can go farther. Tony snapped his fingers. Exactly what I was thinking. All right, let's go outside, have Jarvis call start, and then. Before he could finish, Leon opened his rear thrusters and shot forward, banking out toward the open sky. Whoa, Leon, are you planning to race me while you're wearing a mark? Tony blurted, feeling a strange unease. Leon halted mid-course and leveled off. Otherwise, how would we compete? He said. What I mean is, you can fly without your armor, right? What if your armor isn't fast enough, but you fly past me yourself? How would that count? Tony frowned, remembering that Leon's natural speed was orders of magnitude greater than an iron armor. Am I the kind of person who would cheat? You wouldn't cheat? Then why did you knock me out 2 days ago? All right, fine. I'll get out of the suit. Jarvis, take over the armor. Wait, Jarvis will pilot it? You mean your armor can be fully unmanned? Mr. Stark, I had not completed development of that feature. Uh-huh. How about it? My armor's solid, right? It is very it's a great idea. I considered it before, but I didn't have enough time to implement it fully. Then you really are amazing, Tony. Cough cuff. Jarvis, you ready? We're about to start the race. Tony shifted the topic to cover a twinge of guilty conscience. Yes, Mr. Stark. I will start the timer in 3 seconds. Are you ready? I've been ready for a long time. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Both suits ignited their thrusters together and blasted off, afterburners carving 2 orange streaks into the sky. Leon watched the 2 traces vanish into the cloud line and grinned. Honestly, if you ask me, both suits are too slow. Suit pretty, but for me it's mostly sentimental, Tony said, then shrugged and let his collar pop open. The strange biofield Leon had shown them earlier unfurled, and he shot upward like a reverse meteor. No way, Tony whooped, thrusting into the sky with every thruster and gyroscope at full power. He'd never felt so free. For as long as there's been people, the sky has been above us, teasing us. To finally be up here, this is what everyone who ever tried to fly must have wanted. He felt heroic, invincible. Jarvis, how far behind is Leon's suit? Jarvis's voice was unblinking. I'm sorry, Mr. Stark. You are currently 3 suit lengths behind the mark controlled by my subroutine. What? Tony glanced up toward the cloud line, but the view was blocked. That can't be. Accelerate full thrust, Jarvis. Mark II poured more power into its boosters and punched through the cloud bank, slicing upward against the atmosphere. Minutes stretched. Still, Tony couldn't see Leon's exhaust. Where the hell did he go? How is he that fast? Young Master Leon used a more coordinated motion system and significantly reduced armor mass, Jarvis explained. Both acceleration and top speed have increased. Tony hated losing. I can't lose. Jarvis, overload the power. Sir, I must advise you that continuing to such altitudes will expose the armor to extreme cold. Component functionality will degrade. Shut up and go. They climbed. Finally, Tony made out a thin exhaust ribbon far above. There, catch up and blast past him. Sir, the outer shell has begun to frost. Continued ascent may cause component failure. Keep accelerating. Don't stop. Passion swelled in Tony. In a comic book narrative, he'd power up, surge beyond physics, and snatch victory. Reality has rules. As they rose, frost spread across the Mark II's plating, thickening fast. The suit's acceleration dropped. Despite Jarvis's warnings, the circuits began to fail. Then, without ceremony, Mark II went dead. Electronics iced, power cut off, systems froze. No, what's happening? Ah! Tony's body lost its balance, and he began to drop, arms and legs flailing like a falling frog. Jarvis, open the wings. There was no response. The OS had been shorted by the cold. The suit plummeted, gravity insisting. Oh no, Leon, save me. No problem, Tony. Leon was there in an instant, intercepting the falling suit and locking an arm around the Mark's waist. The free fall halted in a single, effortless motion. The sensation of being caught, safe, utterly safe, hit Tony like a punch and then a release. He swayed on the attachment and laughed nervously. My God, that was too close. Thanks, Leon, though I guess you were watching me look like an idiot from up there. Don't be dramatic. I wanted to see if you could keep your head in a crisis and recover on your own. You sounded like you were going to be magnanimous about it, Tony said, breath still rough. Jarvis's voice came back online as systems warmed, this time piloting Leon's suit. Sir, I'm relieved you are unharmed. That was quite the incident. Leon hadn't let go. All right, race is over. Let's go home. Tony agreed. On the return flight, he asked, curiosity partly to hide his bruised ego. You said the gold you used was to stop icing? Exactly. A gold layer acts as a thermal conductor and prevents ice from forming on critical components. With it, the armor can operate in extreme conditions. Tony fell quiet, thinking. Back in the underground garage, with his suit removed by the auto arms, he sat on a crate, a bit deflated. You won, he admitted. That's right, I won. Leon walked over and sat beside him, cheerful. But actually, you won too. Tony blinked. Huh? You taught me how your iron armor works. Without you, I wouldn't have had the idea or the starting point. Tony frowned, then recognized the truth. If you'd given this to other engineers, couldn't they have learned it? Of course, but learning and iterating on a design is different from inventing it from scratch. Creating something new, making it from zero, that's the hard part. And you're the creator of that first spark, Tony. Without your upgrades, in 20 years, maybe no one would have built a scaled arc reactor or these flight systems, Leon said. My win today was just improving on what you invented, but didn't have time to perfect. You think I couldn't do those things? Tony shook his head fast. No, I didn't mean that. Just give me time. I can do it too. Leon patted Tony on the shoulder. See, you were only short a little time. I saved you that time with my super brain. Tony's disappointment eased into a complicated smile. You really are different now. Did you just notice? I'm basically a little Superman. How could I be the same as before? No, I mean, you've matured. Is that supposed to be an insult or praise? Praise, of course. All right, Tony, you've changed too. Since Afghanistan, you're a little less insufferable. Stop! I'm not letting you insult me with compliments. See? What did I tell you? They bickered like kids and friends. Leon stood, hoisted his armor over his shoulder, and started to fade into the shadows of the workshop. That kid, Tony said, shaking his head, then the corner of his mouth lifted. He's amazing. Chapter 18, Strength Test. A few days later, rainy, dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the fine drizzle turned the sea outside the Stark mansion into a honeycomb of ripples. In the underground lab, Leon stood in a tight sensor suit. Circular iron plates were fixed over his chest and limbs, sensor wires snaking from each plate to a hulking machine. Are you sure this iron block can test my strength? He asked, flexing his wrists. Today was the test Tony and he had agreed on, the day to measure whatever new limits Leon's body had reached. Tony had dragged him out of bed at dawn, and after washing and breakfast, they had come straight to the lab. On the seawall-facing wall of the underground room, a 3-meter radius circular iron block was bolted in place. This, Tony declared, was the strength tester. Why do you always state a fact like it's a question? Tony said with a grin, brimming with confidence. I knew this day would come after you went to space, so I built this in advance. Most of it is made from a tungsten alloy I synthesized, he went on. High melting point, high density, exceptional wear resistance. 1,000,000 tons pressing down on it won't deform it. Tens of thousands of tons of impact won't damage it. The alloy I used to make this tester, if you'd used it to build battleships, they'd be centuries ahead of their time. He planted himself behind the console. So relax. I guarantee you can't break it. Leon still looked skeptical. Tony, you sound exactly the same as when we were bragging a few days ago. This is different, Tony said, taken aback for a second. You just stand in front of it, punch with everything you've got, and let me handle the readouts. No, Leon said. At least put on your Iron Man suit first. Tony slapped his forehead. I'm more than 10 meters away. How is that not safe? When did you get so paranoid? Put on the suit, Leon repeated. Fine, I'll wear it, Tony said, hands raised. If it makes our little princess feel better, I'll wear anything. 2 bracelets on his wrists glowed red. Within seconds, a red and gold flight pod wheeled in from the garage and unfolded into armor around him. The suit, Tony's Mark III, a new build he had replicated using Leon's flight data, closed like a second skin. It matched many of the capabilities of the Mark VII from the films, except for the energy core and some refinements. Tony had intentionally left out the liquid circulation cooling system in front of Leon, an affectation that would likely cost him later when he discovered how indispensable it really was. Good enough? Tony asked, stretching and striking a showy pose. I'm looking forward to your display. Leon had to smirk at the borrowed line. I hope this tester you built is as tough as your mouth. He planted his feet in front of the jet-black disc, took a deep breath, and a strange pull of air swelled through the room. Papers fluttered off the desk and scattered. Tony watched, puzzled, as Leon slowly lowered into a squat. Muscles rippled under his suit like sculpted stone. He hauled in a breath and let out a low roar, then punched. The underground room transformed in an instant. The impact exploded through the space like a missile detonation. Rock shattered, dust and mist filled the air, and a violent gust threw Tony across the floor. Tables and chairs slammed into him, the force threatening to carry him out with the hurricane of debris. If Jarvis hadn't fired the suit's thrusters automatically, Tony might have been torn out of the lab entirely. It was over in a dozen seconds. The air and the shaking subsided, leaving the room buried in dust and visibility near zero. Cough, cough, what happened? Tony managed, cutting the thrusters and setting the suit down. Leon exhaled again, this time a gentler wind that blew away the last of the smoke and rubble. When the dust cleared, Tony's mind reeled. The minimalist underground lab had turned into a ruin. Walls were pockmarked, lighting fixtures and machinery were sheared away, windows and glass were gone. The dozen limited edition sports cars that had lined the garage were nowhere to be seen. The tester itself, the circular block bolted into the wall, had been punched clean through. Where the disc had been, there was a jagged hole looking out over the misty sea. My God, Tony breathed. By afternoon, they were in the suburbs, on a wet patch of grass outside Los Angeles. The drizzle still fell. Leon, wearing a soaked shirt, kept tapping at a huge circular iron block with a hammer, the clang ringing in the rain. You said this thing could take my strength, he complained. I didn't even use half my power, and it went from flat to convex, and then into the sea. I had to dive to the bottom to salvage it. Give it a rest, Tony said from 50 meters away. He hovered in the suit, running diagnostics and calibrating the instruments while speaking through the radio. Even Jarvis and I didn't expect your strength to go this far. We modeled your growth from the data you sent back during that 3-month stay in Los Angeles 6 months ago, he continued. In 90-odd days, your strength only increased by a few hundred tons. Based on that, we predicted your post-space strength would be between 1,000 and 5,000 tons, and your speed wouldn't exceed Mach 5. Who would have thought you'd become this strong? Tony shook his head. This is exponential growth. Nobody's numbers predicted it. Look at Clark Kent in Smallville. He couldn't even fly in high school, and he'd been absorbing solar radiation for years. Leon stopped hammering long enough to tap his earphone. You still watch that show? I thought it did a good job showing Superman's growth, though the later episodes get a little extreme. But he never got strong this fast, Tony shot back. Maybe it's because you're an adult, or because being out in space made your solar absorption far more efficient. Leon gave the iron disc another hard hit. The metal rang and then slowly settled back toward its original shape. Okay, he said, the tester's back to its original form, so how do we actually run the test now? Chapter 19. This power is far from enough. For now, we can't find any test equipment that can survive a full-force punch, Tony said. We'll have to change our method and use multidimensional data to estimate the approximate value. Do what you need, Leon replied. Pushing into the air won't affect me, right? It won't. You've got a biofield. Tony adjusted the instruments and spoke into the radio. Then fly up and press down on that test block. Think Superman pushing an asteroid. It won't measure your punching power directly, but it will measure your pushing strength. We'll test punching speed next, and Jarvis can combine the data to estimate your punch force. All right, Leon took off, inverted himself, and pressed both hands down on the iron block. I'm going to start exerting force. Use your maximum strength. Of course. Leon's eyes narrowed, muscles bulged, and he pushed with everything he had. Tony's team reacted instantly. Numbers leapt on the screen, into 9 digits in a blink, then kept climbing until Leon roared and the reading began to fluctuate. That's enough, Tony said, his voice trembling slightly. Leon let out a long breath. So what's my pushing force? Tony swallowed. 370 million kilograms, 370,000 tons. Jarvis predicts your one-arm strength should be between 140,000 and 190,000 tons. That high? Leon was surprised. It wasn't small. Even the movie Man of Steel's early strength setting, 800,000 tons after decades under the sun, was supposed to be huge. Leon had only been absorbing sun energy for a few months. This kind of strength could make him virtually invincible on Earth. Still, it's still not enough, he muttered, clenching his fist. Earth is just a small pond. There are bigger giants out there. I've got a long way to go. Tony rolled his eyes at Leon's self-deprecating grandeur and fired up the next test. Next, punch speed. Hit at the fastest speed you can sustain in an attack. Leon thought for a moment. I normally use my biofield to protect the surroundings when I punch. I'll use the maximum speed my biofield can withstand at full power. He planted himself on the block, gathered his core, hips and waist torque, and threw a straight punch. It was a textbook blast of technique, optimized for force, but intentionally an empty swing without the tens of thousands of tons behind it. On Tony's monitor, nothing seemed to move. Then a value popped up without warning. 10,769 meters per second, nearly Mach 32. Tony propped his hands on the desk, staring at the screen. Is that your top speed when exerting maximum sustainable force? He asked. Leon shrugged. It's a bit slow. You can go faster? Faster, yes. But if I push past this, my biofield will breach and the surrounding environment will be affected, like in the garage this morning. Tony clicked his tongue in awe. Faster. This is God tier. God? Leon sounded unimpressed. Gods are like that. Still, it's not enough. As I get stronger, my biofield will improve and my punching speed can increase. Tony found that impossible to accept. Do you realize what it means to throw tens of thousands of tons at that speed? Roughly, like a small meteor hitting Earth? Close. Tony wiped his face with both hands. Jarvis, give him the exact value. Yes, sir. Young Master Leon, according to the model calculations, Jarvis said in its calm voice, at an instantaneous acceleration to Mach 31, an all-out single-arm punch delivers over 1.5 trillion newtons of impact force in 1 second, equivalent to about 240 Hiroshima atomic bombs detonating simultaneously. Tony slammed his palm on the table. That's also equivalent to roughly 3.6 million tons of TNT. And that's not even accounting for the small surface area of your fist. The pressure would be even higher. Jarvis? Tony continued. Yes, young Master Leon, you are effectively a walking, extremely high-yield explosive device. Your destructive potential is enormous. Tony took 2 deep breaths, excitement written all over him. Who would have thought his kid brother, always arguing, always squabbling, had been keeping this kind of power in reserve? Now, do you still think you're weak? I don't even know why you want to get stronger. Was it because I didn't protect you enough when you were little? No, Tony. You were great to me, even used me to get attention with girls. But there were other reasons. Leon considered it. As a kid, he'd always feared the Time Variance Authority might come for him. The helplessness of those days left a mark. That's why he hungered for strength now, because power removes helplessness. Tony's brain went off on a tangent. What? Because I was always picking up girls, you want to beat me up with your superpowers? He muttered, then brightened. Then I really should take you down. Leon tapped his comm earpiece. All right, keep going. There's more to shock you. Over the next hour, Leon ran through the battery of tests. Heat vision temperature, freezing breath range, supersight, flight, everything. Tony's reactions descended from stunned awe to near breakdown. My God, became holy, and finally, you're finished. It wasn't that Tony was numb. It was Leon's relentless Versailles-style indifference that did him in. A heat ray capable of 6,000 degrees with adjustable power and range, Leon called it barely usable. Freezing breath that could freeze several kilometers instantly, still far too weak. Supersight that could image through the globe but couldn't penetrate lead, better not used. Super hearing? Too noisy, not useful. When the tests finally wound down, Tony slumped in his chair, eyes hollow, one hand idle on the mouse. And then, what's the next ability to test? He asked in a voice that was part awe, part resignation. Chapter 20, Tony's Family Talk. Next ability, that's it. We're done with the tests, Tony. Leon spread his hands. Done? Tony brightened instantly, his back straightening. He leaned closer to the chart on the computer. I thought you were going to give me a whole page of abilities. A whole page? No way, it can't be that over the top. Leon moved closer to Tony. Why not? Tony feigned offense. I remember you saying you had all of Superman's powers. I thought you were going to show off and claim time reversal, like in Superman 1, or healing with heat vision or something. Leon landed in front of him. Don't be ridiculous. How would I have abilities like that? You said it. You have all of Superman's abilities. Tony emphasized. I still remember your solemn promise in the garage. Leon was speechless. His own words had come back to bite him. He hadn't expected Tony to take him that literally. All right, I'll take that back. I misspoke. I don't have every Superman power. I have the abilities of a Kryptonian. The reason Superman is so strong is because he's the protagonist, Tony mused. Not every Kryptonian is as powerful as him. Leon walked to the computer and checked the records. Don't be fooled by how quickly my strength has increased. I estimate my current rate is actually getting close to its limit. Tony found that an interesting point. That actually makes sense. A reproducing species shouldn't be capable of infinite evolution. He rubbed his chin. Maybe we can run a simple experiment, build a model to estimate your future growth curve. That's what I want to do, Leon agreed, but I'll need your help for the follow-up tests. No problem. Tony took it on. Leon smiled and patted Tony's shoulder. Thanks, Tony. But for now, we should head home. There's the underground room waiting for repairs. Damn it, don't remind me about that underground room. I can already picture Pepper's angry face. Tony looked up at the sky as countless raindrops fell. How about this? Pepper's your problem. The underground room's mine. I don't like that deal, but deal. Night fell. Leon used his biofield with heat vision and freezing breath to solidify the last section of the rebuilt wall. He casually wiped cement from his palm onto his denim jumpsuit. Phew, done. He leaned against the wall and looked around, pleased. The battle-damaged underground room that had been full of holes was now completely renovated, even freshly painted. Superpowers sure made work go faster. After confirming everything was in order, Leon headed upstairs, walked into the yard, shrugged out of his jeans, and dove into the pool. After dozens of laps, he climbed out, shook his hair back, and leaned on the pool edge, staring up at the stars. The summer night was misty, the soft lapping of water soothing. Droplets fell into streams across his chest, making his muscles stand out with every movement. Exhausted, aren't you? Congratulations, you've been promoted to Stark Family Renovation Boy. From now on, the family won't have to worry about repairs. Tony's voice came from behind him. Leon didn't turn. Only this time. Next time you break something at home, Tony, you fix it yourself. Tony handed him a glass of red wine. Then next time it'll be your turn to deal with Pepper. She just left. She kept complaining that I only caused destruction at home and insisted I go back to the company. She's not wrong. You really should go to work, Tony. Leon laughed. What kind of company president stays home all the time? A company like that's going to go bankrupt sooner or later. Tony swirled his wine. Maybe I just happen to have one of those presidents right beside me. Get lost. I'll find a successor president soon, unlike you. Leon picked up his glass and drained it. The pool settled into silence, punctuated only by the night wind and water. After a while, Tony slipped into the pool as well. He swam a few laps, then stopped beside Leon, slightly out of breath, and looked up at the stars. Leon, Tony started, then fell quiet for a long moment. What? Just say it. Why are you being coy? Leon saw through him. Tony shrugged. I just feel like maybe we should have a proper talk since we're brothers. Why the sudden need for a talk? What's this? Tony's sudden concern? Did I scare you today? Tony nodded. You did scare me, and you didn't. I never expected you to get as outrageously strong as you did today. He paused, sipping his wine. That's beyond what the world can understand. The force in one of your punches is equivalent to 3.6 million tons of TNT. No one in this world could stop you from doing anything. Not even me, Tony said with genuine admiration. He looked at Leon's sculpted body. You're too strong. If anyone else had gone through today's tests, they might not be able to sleep tonight from fear. Will you be afraid? Leon asked bluntly. Of course not. I'm your dearest older brother. I'm the older brother who would still take you to dances to see pretty women even after you peed on me when you were 2. How could I be worried or scared just because you got stronger? I'll be happy for you." Tony's sincerity shone through. Leon knew Tony rarely lied. No one could make him lie, and the gentleness in his voice was as calming as water, making trust the natural choice. "I know, Leon, you've never relied on brute strength, power, or money to do whatever you wanted." Tony continued, "In these 18, almost 19 years, you've never used the money or the adoration you get to do bad things." "Me too," Tony added, refusing to exclude himself. "So I want to ask, do you have any plans for the future?" At that moment, Tony sounded like a father patiently guiding a son about to enter the world. Beneath the question was a fear that sudden power might unbalance Leon, turn him into a spoiled nouveau rich. It felt a touch patronizing, but after Tony dropped his usual affectation, his concern felt genuinely touching.